Shocking deaths have always been part of horror, but the ones that hit hardest don't rely on gore or spectacle. They arrive at the worst possible moment, change the direction of the story, and leave the audience stunned rather than satisfied. These are 10 horror films with the most shocking deaths, ranked from the ones you can almost brace for, to the moments that completely pull the rug out from under you. Ranked at number 10, The Strangers, Chapter 2. In 2025, director Renny Harlin returned to the franchise with The Strangers, Chapter 2, continuing the story immediately after the events of the first film. Rather than resetting the narrative, the film treats its runtime as a continuation of the same nightmare, following Maya as she attempts to survive in a town where no one can be fully trusted. Unlike traditional slasher setups, the kills here rarely feel staged. Several characters are removed abruptly, often mid-conversation, or during moments that feel transitional rather than climactic. One of the most unsettling deaths happens in a public space that should feel safe, and the film refuses to dramatize it. There is no build-up, no heroic sacrifice, just a quick and irreversible act that leaves Maya even more isolated. Harlan also leans into fragmentation. Flashbacks, sudden disappearances, and incomplete information surround each death, making it difficult to understand who is truly safe or how close danger really is. This approach mirrors Maya's mental state, where shock and exhaustion replace clear judgment. From a production angle, this approach ties directly to Harlan's decision to treat the trilogy as one continuous narrative. Several deaths function less as endpoints and more as removals, stripping away allies and shrinking Maya's options scene by scene. That structure explains why the film ends where it does, with no emotional release and no finality. Ranked at number 9, The Home. James DeMonico's The Home landed in 2025, and it's easily one of the strangest entries on this list because the shock comes from how casually death is treated. DeMonico strips things down and traps the audience in a single location, an aging care facility that looks clean, calm, and polite on the surface, while quietly rotting underneath. Max, played by Pete Davidson, is sent to the home as part of a community service sentence. He's already damaged, carrying guilt from a broken childhood and a personal loss the film circles without immediately explaining. That matters because the deaths in the home don't feel random. They feel like the end result of neglect, secrecy, and systems designed to keep things running smoothly no matter who gets hurt. Residents vanish, bodies appear where they shouldn't, and the staff reacts with an eerie calm that suggests this has all happened before. DeMonico also avoids gore and instead leans into implication, letting the audience sit with the aftermath instead of the act itself. Production-wise, the film keeps its budget tight and its cast small, which works in its favor. The confined setting and repetitive routines mirror the story's themes of stagnation and decay. Ranked at number 8, Weapons. Released in 2025 and directed by Zach Kreger, Weapons earns its ranking because the deaths land sideways. The film's inciting event is clinical and specific. 17 children from the same third-grade class leave their homes at exactly 2:17 a.m. and disappear. The precision matters. It removes chaos from the equation and replaces it with intent. One child, Alex Lilly, stays behind. That absence becomes the emotional fault line the rest of the film fractures around. Kreger structures Weapons in 6 overlapping chapters, each tied to a different adult orbiting the mystery. This is where the deaths gain weight. People die not because they wandered into danger, but because they were already compromised by grief, guilt, or opportunism. Julia Garner's teacher is not written as sympathetic or villainous. She is written as exposed. Josh Brolin's grieving father becomes dangerous, not through rage, but fixation. Amy Madigan's Aunt Gladys is unsettling because the film never lets you fully pin down her intentions, only their consequences. And unlike traditional horror rankings driven by body count or gore, Weapons relies on narrative placement. Deaths occur during conversations, off-screen intervals, or through delayed confirmation. That approach divided critics. Some praised the restraint, while others criticized the lack of release. Ranked at number 7, Stopmotion. The 2023 British horror film Stopmotion marks the feature debut of director Robert Morgan, a filmmaker already known for disturbing short-form animation work long before this project. The story follows Ella, a stop-motion animator trapped in a suffocating creative partnership with her mother. After her mother is hospitalized, Ella begins working on her own film, using crude, unsettling puppets made from found materials. That process becomes inseparable from her mental state. Several deaths occur indirectly, discovered through aftermaths rather than witnessed acts. The shock comes from proximity. The camera often stays close to Ella's face or hands while harm happens just outside the frame. One detail many viewers miss is how much of the animation was done practically. The puppets were animated frame by frame on set, not added digitally, which slowed production but allowed the physical decay of the models to mirror Ella's deterioration. The Ashman concept was developed from Morgan's earlier short films, but its design was intentionally kept inconsistent, changing shape slightly across scenes to prevent visual familiarity. Test audiences reacted more strongly when her influence was left unresolved, so scenes clarifying her role were removed. That decision directly affects how certain deaths register. You are forced to decide whether they are acts of madness or intrusion. The film was produced on a reported budget of roughly £800,000 and premiered on Shudder, where it quickly became one of the platform's most discussed horror releases of the year. Ranked at number 6, Keeper. Perkins returned to theaters in 2025 with Keeper, a stripped-down cabin nightmare that arrived less than a year after Longlegs and quietly signaled a course correction. Where the monkey leaned scattered and jokey, Keeper tightens its grip, choosing discomfort over chaos and patience over noise. The setup looks harmless at first glance. Malcolm brings Liz to a remote family cabin for a private weekend, but the unease is immediate. Conversations stall, affection feels rehearsed, and silence stretches longer than it should. Perkins lingers on gestures instead of dialogue, letting glances and pauses do the work. Small intrusions pile up. An untouched cake appears. A pendant surfaces in the stream. Relatives drift in and out without explanation. None of it screams danger, but all of it feels invasive. Tatiana Maslany carries most of the film alone, and Perkins leans into that isolation. Liz isn't given neat backstory or emotional speeches. Her anxiety builds through routine moments that start slipping out of sync. Sound design plays a major role here. The forest creaks, the cabin breathes, and the quiet becomes its own threat. When the film finally breaks restraint in the last act, it does so visually rather than narratively, favoring imagery over clarity. That choice split audiences. Critics praised the atmosphere and Maslany's performance, but reactions turned colder once the themes became obvious and answers stayed vague. Keeper premiered to mixed reviews and modest box office returns. Ranked at number 5, Late Night with the Devil. Broadcast horror gets twisted in Late Night with the Devil, which surfaced in 2024 as one of the year's most unusual genre releases. Set during a fictional Halloween night episode of a struggling 1970s late-night talk show, the film blends found-footage aesthetics, period satire, and supernatural escalation into a single, contained setting. David Dasmalkian anchors the chaos as Jack Delroy, a host desperate to outrun declining ratings and the shadow of Johnny Carson-style competition. The structure matters here. The movie unfolds almost entirely as a recently recovered master tape, complete with ad breaks, broadcast glitches, and behind-the-scenes fragments. Guests range from a smug paranormal skeptic to a psychic performer and a young girl tied to an alleged satanic cult. What begins as awkward live television slowly mutates into something dangerous, with deaths that shock not through excess gore, but through timing and exposure. Violence erupts in front of cameras, studio audiences, and viewers at home, collapsing the safe distance usually promised by television. One detail many viewers miss is how closely the film mirrors real 1970s late-night production schedules. Shows aired nearly every weeknight, leaving hosts exhausted and creatively desperate, a pressure the film uses as psychological fuel rather than background flavor. The possession storyline isn't just supernatural spectacle, it's framed as a career gamble spiraling out of control. The film premiered to strong festival buzz and solid critical scores, with Dasmalkian widely singled out for a breakout performance. Ranked at number 4, The Shrouds. Cronenberg returned to feature filmmaking in 2024 with The Shrouds, a film shaped directly by personal loss and filtered through his long-running obsession with flesh, technology, and control. Vincent Cassel plays Karsh, a widowed tech entrepreneur who transforms grief into infrastructure by inventing grave tech, a system that allows families to monitor decomposing bodies through embedded scanners and digital displays. Death here is not hidden, it is streamed, archived, and optimized. Rather than relying on sudden violence, the film lets mortality unfold in prolonged, clinical detail. Karsh watches his wife's remains change over time, bone by bone, while investors, hackers, and rivals circle his invention. When the cemetery housing the Gravetech systems is vandalized and the data compromised, death becomes unstable. Corpses disappear, images are altered, and the boundary between physical remains and digital fabrication begins to collapse. Jennifer Dale, Diane Kruger, and Guy Pearce orbit Karsh as mirrors of obsession, suspicion, and desire, while the film quietly introduces geopolitical tension through foreign backers and surveillance paranoia. The film premiered at Cannes to a muted response, especially when compared to louder body horror successors it indirectly inspired. Yet its reputation has grown as viewers reassess its ideas rather than its shock value. Ranked at number 3, The Devil's Bath. The Devil's Bath opens in 2024, marking the return of Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala, the directing duo behind Goodnight Mommy, this time grounding their horror in documented 18th century history rather than allegory. Set in rural Upper Austria, the film observes Agnes, a newly married woman whose world narrows after leaving her childhood home. Marriage brings labor, religious scrutiny, sexual rejection, and constant correction from her husband's family. None of it is framed as abuse by the community. Instead, every failure is treated as spiritual weakness, leaving Agnes isolated inside a belief system that offers discipline but no language for despair. What the film is quietly building toward is historical fact. Franz and Fiala based the story on records studied by historian Kathy Stewart, detailing cases of suicide by proxy in early modern Europe. Because suicide was believed to guarantee eternal damnation, some deeply depressed individuals committed capital crimes so they could be executed after confession and still attain salvation. The film never lectures this idea. It lets routine, silence, and repetition do the work. Anja Plaschi's performance avoids dramatics entirely, relying on physical withdrawal and behavioral change rather than dialogue. The result is severe, restrained, and difficult to watch. The Devil's Bath was Austria's submission for Best International Feature and received strong festival praise for its accuracy and restraint, though its severity limited mainstream appeal. The ending unsettled critics less for its violence than for how historically inevitable it feels. Ranked at number 2, Handling the Undead 2024. Thea Fichtendal's fiction debut adapts John Ajvide Lindqvist's novel into a restrained Norwegian horror set during an unusually hot summer in Oslo. Rather than centering on chaos or contagion, the film tracks 3 separate households confronted with the return of deceased relatives after a citywide electrical disturbance. An elderly woman attempts to resume daily life with her revived partner. A grieving father struggles to explain his wife's condition to their children. Elsewhere, a grandfather becomes obsessively protective of a grandson who has come back changed. These figures are neither violent nor fully present. They breathe irregularly, remain mute, and show limited responsiveness, existing in a physical state that forces the living to confront unresolved grief rather than fear. The film avoids the language of apocalypse entirely. Zombie culture exists only at the margins, briefly referenced through a video game, reinforcing that the characters understand the rules but choose denial anyway. Vistendal emphasizes duration and observation, letting discomfort arise from caretaking routines, bodily maintenance, and the emotional cost of pretending restoration is possible. Shot on 35mm, the film uses long takes and very little dialogue. Sound and silence do most of the work. It premiered at Sundance in January 2024 and was widely praised for its restraint and performances, especially Renate Reinsve. Many critics noted that the film refuses comfort, focusing instead on how grief lingers when letting go feels impossible. Ranked at number 1, The Innocents. Shown at Cannes in 2021, Eskil Vogt's The Innocents takes place in a Norwegian apartment complex where 4 children discover they have supernatural abilities during a summer break. The focus is on Ida, a 9-year-old girl who feels ignored because her autistic sister needs constant care. She befriends Ben, an abused boy who can move objects with his mind, and Aisha, a kind girl who can communicate mentally. Later, Ida's sister is revealed to have powers as well. The children treat these abilities like games at first, testing limits without understanding consequences. There are no explanations for where the powers come from. Adults exist in the background, but never notice the danger early enough to stop it. Violence escalates slowly and is carried out by children who do not fully grasp right or wrong. Several scenes involve animal cruelty and child-on-child harm, shown without dramatic build-up or warning. Vogt avoids music cues and flashy effects, Most scenes are quiet and observational. The camera stays close to the children and rarely cuts away from their actions. The film was widely praised for its performances and restraint, but it also divided audiences because of how casually it depicts disturbing acts. Its ending leaves no reset or comfort, which is why it earns a place on this list. And that's the list. If you haven't seen some of these yet, don't overthink it. Just pick one and watch it. The Innocents and Handling the Undead are the kind of films you finish and just sit there for a minute. The Devil's Bath isn't an easy watch, but it sticks with you for the right reasons. Even the weaker entries are worth seeing once, just to understand why they land the way they do. If this helped you decide what to watch next, like the video, tell me which one messed with you the most, and subscribe. More lists coming.